If you could step through a portal in time and find yourself standing on the scorching banks of the Nile River, just beyond the towering gates of Cairo in the blazing summer of 1324, you would witness something that would shatter everything you thought you knew about wealth and power. On the western horizon, a massive cloud of dust would begin to rise, stretching for miles across the shimmering desert landscape. As this approaching phenomenon grew closer, you would feel the earth beneath your feet start to vibrate from the thundering rhythm of thousands upon thousands of hooves and the synchronized marching of tens of thousands of human feet. But this was no hostile army coming to conquer Cairo. There were no siege weapons or battle cries. Instead, there was only an almost blinding brilliance, the reflection of sunlight bouncing off an impossible amount of metal. And this was not the glint of steel swords. This was the unmistakable gleam of pure gold. What you would have witnessed marching at the front of this procession would have defied all logic. 500 slaves, each one draped in the finest Persian silk, each one carrying a staff crafted from solid gold, weighing 6 full pounds. Following them, 80 magnificent camels, each one staggering under 300 pounds of pure gold dust packed into leather sacks. At the center sat a king dressed in exquisite brocade, seated beneath a canopy of shimmering silk, surrounded by a mobile city of 60,000 people. This was Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali Empire, making his pilgrimage to Mecca. To the astonished crowds, he appeared like a living deity of wealth descending from the heavens. But the people of Cairo had no idea what was about to happen. They didn't know that this generous king's presence would become a weapon of mass economic destruction. They couldn't imagine that the gold he was about to distribute would poison their entire economy for the next 12 years. During the 14th century, while Europe shivered through the brutal Little Ice Age, West Africa was experiencing a golden age that could rival any civilization on Earth. The Mali Empire stretched across vast territories encompassing modern Mali, Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea. This was a land of peace and order, where travelers wrote that a person could walk across the empire carrying gold on their head and nobody would touch them, because the law was absolute. But the true secret of Mali's power lay beneath the red earth. The empire sat on 3 massive gold fields, so rich that nuggets would wash up during rainy seasons. Farmers discovered gold while digging for yams. Historians estimate that nearly half of all gold circulating throughout the Eastern Hemisphere came from Mali's mines. Mali was the engine room powering the medieval global economy. Mansa Musa ascended to the throne in 1312 after his predecessor, Abu Bakr II, sailed into the Atlantic with 2,000 ships and never returned. While his predecessor sought new worlds across the ocean, Musa decided to announce Mali's power by crossing the desert to Mecca. As a devout Muslim, he took the Hajj pilgrimage seriously. But a king doesn't travel like an ordinary pilgrim. He spent years preparing, emptying treasuries, and conscripting 60,000 people to accompany him. When the caravan departed in 1324, it was like an entire football stadium of people walking across the desert. There were soldiers, scholars, poets, merchants, 12,000 slaves, and thousands of livestock. The logistics were mind-boggling. As they moved through desert trade towns, Musa began spending freely. He didn't believe in hoarding wealth, but in sharing it as God's gift. He gave gold to the poor, built mosques every Friday, and paid guides in raw gold dust.
The rumor of his approach reached Cairo long before he did.
Cairo was the greatest city in the Middle East, capital of the Mamluk Sultanate, where goods from India and China met European markets. Merchants anticipated selling to this rich king and making good profit. They had no idea what catastrophe was coming. When Musa arrived at the pyramids, his camp looked like a new city. After diplomatic negotiations over protocol, he met the Sultan and began distributing gifts on an unprecedented scale. He gave the Sultan 50,000 dinars of gold, then gave gold to viziers, generals, and scribes. The Sultan was charmed and provided Musa with a luxurious palace. This is where the trouble began. Musa stayed 3 months and went shopping. He saw exotic goods he'd never encountered: Turkish silks, Venetian glass, Persian pearls, Arabian perfumes. He bought everything without haggling. If something cost 10 dinars, he gave 20. If a horse cost 100, he gave 300. He distributed gold dust like sand. Merchants thought they'd reached heaven. They raised prices, and Musa kept paying.
He flooded Cairo's market with so much gold it became commonplace. Shopkeepers sat on gold piles they'd never dreamed of owning. Beggars jingled gold coins. Servants tipped with gold nuggets. Everyone felt rich and happy. Mansa Musa became the most beloved man in Egypt.
But while people celebrated, economic laws worked silently in the background. Economics is the study of scarcity. Gold is valuable because it's rare. When gold becomes common as sand, it loses value. Musa had dumped such enormous quantities into Cairo that supply skyrocketed. Everyone had gold, but goods remained the same. More money chasing the same goods means prices rise. This is inflation, but this was devastating hyperinflation. The gold dinar, standard currency throughout the Middle East, began crashing catastrophically. Before Musa arrived, 1 dinar bought a certain amount of wheat. After 1 month, it bought half as much. By the time he left, it bought almost nothing. Merchants realized too late what was happening. They had pockets full of gold worth less each day. Bread prices doubled, then tripled. Rent increased dramatically. Middle-class savings were wiped out. A man who'd saved years for a house could now only buy a horse. Poor people who'd received gifts found their money bought little food because grain prices had soared. Mansa Musa had unintentionally detonated an economic bomb, killing Egypt's currency. But he didn't notice. He was focused on his spiritual journey. After 3 months, he packed up and headed toward Mecca, leaving behind a city drowning in gold while choking on inflation. He arrived in Mecca, performed the Hajj rituals, and gave so much that Mecca and Medina's markets suffered the same fate. He crashed their economies too. Mansa Musa injected what amounts to millions of dollars into the Middle East in months, the largest wealth transfer in the medieval world, done with genuine charity that devastated those it meant to help. The exchange rate fell 25%. The entire region was awash in liquidity, but starving for value. The journey home proved harder. The caravan that turned westward was dramatically different. The camels were empty. The golden staffs were gone. The richest man in history faced a liquidity crisis, having burned through an empire's treasury in under a year. When winter struck, food ran out, people starved, camels died, and Bedouin tribes raided the weakened column. When Musa arrived back in Cairo, he was changed. The generous spender now needed a loan. In great irony, he had to borrow gold from merchants he'd ruined at predatory interest rates. He borrowed back the gold he'd given away at massive markup, essentially financing his own destruction. But by removing gold from circulation, he inadvertently began fixing the problem. Still, inflation lasted 12 years. Musa survived and returned not empty-handed. While he'd lost gold, he'd gained human capital. He recruited architects, poets, and scholars, offering irresistible salaries. He hired Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili for 200 kilograms of gold. In Timbuktu, then just a trading post, they built the magnificent Jingareber Mosque using mud bricks and wood, a masterpiece still standing 700 years later. Musa founded the University of Sankore, filling it with books from Cairo. Timbuktu transformed into Africa's intellectual capital, where books were more valuable than gold. The library eventually held over 400,000 manuscripts, the largest since Alexandria. This was the true legacy. The gold vanished, inflation settled, but knowledge built civilization. He transformed Mali from a mining state into a global cultural center. But the world cared about gold. In 1375, the Catalan Atlas showed a black king on a golden throne holding a grapefruit-sized gold nugget. The caption read, "He was the richest king in all the land." This image changed everything. Europe saw Africa as El Dorado. The image sparked hunger, leading eventually to tragedy. Portuguese sailors searched for Musa's kingdom, leading to colonization. Europeans came for gold but took people as slaves. The fame Musa bought led to destroying the sovereignty he wanted to project. Mansa Musa died in 1337, leaving an empire that was the world's envy. But resource-based empires are fragile. His sons couldn't hold it together. The empire crumbled, trade routes shifted, and American gold flooded markets, ending Mali's monopoly. But the gold crash remains a unique economic lesson. It teaches that money is fiction, shared belief. Musa proved you can have too much of a good thing, that economies need balance, not just cash injections. He showed hyperinflation isn't just modern, but a fundamental economic law triggered by one man's shopping spree. Today, Musa is listed as history's richest person at $400 billion, or incalculable wealth. But these numbers miss the point. He didn't just have money, he was the money, controlling the global reserve currency supply. His story is paradoxical. Remembered as wealth's ultimate symbol, his famous act was economic destruction. He ruined thousands by trying to be kind. He destroyed his fortune by sharing it. He taught that charity without economic understanding becomes a curse. It brings us back to that desert image. The golden king dropping gold bars while merchants cry. Power without understanding is dangerous. Musa conquered the desert, built great mosques, fostered learning, but was defeated by the invisible market hand. He broke the World Bank simply by spending freely. The gold he gave is gone, dispersed into time's sands, but the lesson remains. True wealth isn't what you hold, but what you build with your mind. Timbuktu's library outlasted Cairo's gold boom. The richest man died, but his ideas lived on. That's Mali's real treasure. The gold was dust, but the legacy was solid. Subscribe to stay ahead, because when history books are written, you'll want to be among those who saw it coming.